In this video, we will look at the Stalinist development of the productive forces, the super-industrialization that was associated with Stalin. It was Joseph Stalin who transformed the Soviet Union from a backwards agrarian nation, barely able to sustain itself, was suffering famine from the absolute destruction of the previous wars, into an industrial superpower that was able to rival the US, started sending people to space, and was at the forefront of scientific and technological development in the space of just 30 years. Stalin knew that the imperialist powers were coming to destroy them, and they were not ready for this given how economically backwards they were. Which is why Stalin said, "We are 50 to 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years. Either we do it, or they will crush us." The Soviets launched a series of 5-year plans aimed at industrialization, which turned out to be very successful, managing to industrialize and have huge economic growth while the West was facing the Great Depression. The Soviets managed to achieve what the capitalist countries took 50 to 100 years to do, in just the space of 10 years, done through the determination, willpower, and resilience of the Soviet people, working hand in hand for the future of their nation. We can see how this played out in the agricultural sector, with the whole collectivization process, which was not implemented for some ideological top-down reason made by the Soviet government, but was actually a mutual interaction between the peasants and the party that led to the process of collectivization. What many people don't understand is that collective forms of agriculture have been a big part of Russian culture and history, through the Obshchina or the Mir. So the policy of collectivization wasn't some alien decision made by the Soviet government, but it was actually a return to a more human form of being that had been present through the history of Russian civilization and lost when the Russians entered into a class-based society, which caused misery and a lost sense of being amongst the Russian peasants, which the Soviet people and government also wanted to return to, because they knew that this was a more efficient form of agriculture, which you can see the results for here in the tables provided. The results clearly show that under the collectivization, they were able to produce more agricultural products, with the agricultural production increasing each year, except for the agricultural crisis that happened between 1930 and 1933, that we will address in a later video. However, if you exclude the anomaly, there is definitely a correlation that shows that the agricultural production increases through the years. Now let's look at the industrial sector, which was the main focus of the 5-year plans. As you can see here from the tables provided, there is a massive level of growth through the 5-year plans, with the growth rates over 100% in certain areas. This level of growth was absolutely unheard of at the time. So the myth that the Soviet economy stagnated under Stalin is an absolute myth, and even Western academics can admit the absolutely insane level of economic growth that occurred under Stalin. Comparing Soviet economic growth to the West, we can see that the Soviets grew far more faster than the capitalist countries. As you can see, during this period when industrial output declined in the US, France and Italy, stagnated in Britain, Germany, who had limited success, and even Japan, who was still a developing economy, came nowhere close to the Soviets, who had their industrial outputs quadruple during this period. Even if we look at GDP per capita increases, which isn't a perfect metric of economic growth, but still tells us some useful stuff, and is used a lot by Western economists, the Soviets again absolutely destroy the capitalist countries in this regard. As you can see, no country even comes close to comparing to any region in the Soviet Union, where every region in the Soviet Union saw over 100% economic growth in just the space of 14 years. Which just goes to show how fast the Soviet economy grew under Stalin. And it was not just the economy that grew under Stalin. Almost any metric that you can think of to measure people's standard of living increased under Stalin. For example, if we look at education, this was another great success under Stalin. In 1917, the literacy rates for males was 37.4% and 12.5% for females. Then by 1926, it had reached 65.4% for males, 37.9% for females, and then by 1939 it was 81.1% over the whole of the Soviet Union could read. And then finally, it had reached almost 100% by the 1950s. It was thanks to Stalin that the Soviets were able to industrialize so fast. This is what Russians remember him for and why they love him so much. Stalin began with a plow and left Russia with nuclear weapons. The level of development under Stalin is something not even Western experts would deny, and it is one of the greatest achievements for him.